You've got a blade humming inside a dead engine, 3 melted techs on record, and you're still calling me grease monkey? Cole said, calmly wiping blood off his knuckles with a fuel rag. The rest of the garage crew froze, not because of his words, but because the engine behind him, long thought decommissioned, was beginning to purr like something alive and hungry. It hadn't even been an hour since Cole Brennan walked into Deck 9, and already everyone hated him. He looked out of place, no question. The other mechanics were 10-limbed, silicon-spined, or wired into data ports through their skulls. Cole had scars, a limp, and one eye that didn't quite focus right. His jumpsuit was human-made, stitched with patches and caked in old oil. He carried no tool belt, no diagnostic interface, just a stubborn glare and a canvas bag that clinked when he walked. The moment he set foot in the garage, the mocking started. Vernak, the lead tech, boomed across the hangar. "Careful where you step, Terran! Don't want you drooling on fusion cores you can't spell." Laughter rippled through the crew. Cole didn't respond. He just nodded, dropped his bag by a bench, and looked around at the endless rows of gutted ships, half-melted engines, and the massive central workspace covered in soot and burnt plasma scars. This place had seen war. And parts of it still smelled like it. He was assigned to what they called the Grave Corner, a section with derelict parts nobody dared touch. Among them was the one engine no one joked about, a jagged, dark alloy monstrosity covered in weld burns and alien script. It had no identification tag, no model number, just a series of scorched warning labels and something carved into the frame in Terran standard. "Do not reactivate." So naturally, that was the one they assigned to him. As he stood before it, a wiry old alien janitor pushed a broom past him and muttered under his breath. 3 gone. Fried bones in minutes. That engine ain't dead. It's dreaming. Cole didn't even blink. He just grabbed a flathead and began disassembling the rusted outer panels. By the second hour, the others had grown bored of teasing and went back to pretending to work. Cole didn't need their help. He preferred silence. He pulled pieces apart with eerie precision, his hands moving like he already knew where everything went. He wasn't just fixing something, he was performing surgery on a machine he'd seen before. His hands trembled only once, when he reached a housing compartment and noticed something strange. It wasn't a power core. It wasn't even mechanical. It was jammed between coolant lines and reactor feed, buried deep and sealed with makeshift plating. He loosened it carefully. It wasn't supposed to be there. The object slid out with a metallic scrape. It was a blade. Roughly the length of his forearm, blackened with age, etched with Terran Special Ops symbols and a faint glow that pulsed as he held it. It vibrated like a heartbeat. His face hardened. He looked around to see if anyone was watching. The young alien tech across the bay, a thin kid with too many eyes and too much curiosity, was half watching him between tasks. Cole turned away, wiping the blade with a cloth, wrapping it tightly, and sliding it into the canvas bag. It was then the engine let out a low hum. Not a spark, not a glitch, an actual hum, like a war chant warming up. Lights flickered across the bay. One of the older mechanics cursed and banged a console, thinking it was a power surge. But Cole knew better. He stood slowly, dusted his hands, and walked over to the console near the far wall. It had been dead for years. Everyone said it was a relic, useless. He typed in a 10-digit override code. To his surprise, it still worked. The screen blinked. A symbol appeared. It wasn't a manufacturer's logo. It was a skull-shaped insignia wrapped in a broken chain. He stared at it, his expression unreadable. The same moment, a sharp alarm sounded in the upper levels. A command drone descended, scanning the hangar. It dropped a datapad on the worktable beside him and floated away. The crew wandered over, curious. Vernak picked it up and squinted. Repair order. High clearance tags. Sealed codes. What's this, government junk? He turned to Cole. You mess with the wrong drive core, ape? Cole didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the blade now humming faintly inside his bag. Vernak sneered. Don't get all spooky, grease monkey. You've got 1 day to fix that death trap. or I'll weld you inside it myself." The others laughed again, but it didn't carry the same arrogance as before. Something about Cole's silence unsettled them. The way he moved. The way he seemed to know. That night, as most of the crew turned in, Cole stayed behind. He bolted the doors, switched the lights to dim, and he began dismantling the engine from the inside out, working faster now, more deliberate. Every bolt he unscrewed echoed like a countdown. Every plate revealed more secrets. He found traces of radiation, shielded but still active. He scanned the coolant. It was synthetic blood, not industrial. The engine wasn't just a power source. It was a body. By the time morning came, he had 36 photos, 2 containment chambers cobbled together from scrap, and a schematic that made his blood run cold. The Reaper class wasn't a myth. It wasn't decommissioned. It was buried. And somehow, it had been hidden in a garage bay, assigned to him under a false name, delivered in silence. The others rolled in around dawn, complaining about schedules and sleep rations. Cole just stood there, facing the half-exposed core, a blade across the table, and engine panels glowing like something alive. Vernak stomped up behind him and said, "Well? You gonna fix it or keep staring at it like it's your long-lost ex?" Cole finally turned. "You're right. I should have left it buried." The engine let out a deep, animalistic growl, just low enough for only Cole to hear. His hand drifted toward the blade, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. He didn't need to. Not when the war inside that engine had already started. The next morning, the atmosphere in Deck 9 had changed. The usual snarky remarks and greasy bets over who would short-circuit what had all but disappeared. Instead, there was a strange, tense quiet, the kind that creeps into war zones seconds before the shelling starts. Cole didn't speak much as he reassembled the outer shell of the war engine. Every now and then, he'd pause, press his hand to the side, and listen, not with a scanner, but with instinct, the way a soldier listens for breathing in a dark hallway. The blade he had pulled out the day before sat wrapped in cloth on his workstation, humming faintly like it knew the metal nearby was part of something unfinished. Vernak kept an eye on him all morning. He didn't admit it, but he was rattled. One of the older crew members who had teased Cole the loudest hadn't shown up since last night. His tools were still on the rack. His food chip hadn't been used. When asked, no one knew where he'd gone. Vernak chalked it up to drunken laziness or an unapproved nap in the radiation shielding chamber, but even he didn't sound convinced. Cole knew better. The engine had fed. By midday, a new development arrived, literally. A command drone, sleeker than the first and painted in deep navy colors, descended from the upper shaft of the hangar and dropped off another datapad. This one didn't land softly. It smacked onto the table like a gavel in a courtroom. Cole picked it up and scanned the data. His eyebrows twitched slightly. The encryption was older than most tech in the sector. He recognized it. Not from public files or maintenance manuals, but from the kind of redacted briefings that burned up after you read them. Project Reaper. The tag code on the datapad matched the engine's inner hull serials. It wasn't just a component from a dead project, it was the whole core, active, humming, and pulsing under the hangar. Vernak tried to snatch the datapad, but it blinked red when he touched it. Clearance denied. Cole said nothing, just slid it back into the bag where the blade was kept. The engine purred louder for a second, almost like it approved. Another crew member made a joke to lighten the mood, something about Cole installing haunted software. No one laughed. A few hours later, the power grid began fluctuating. First it was just flickers, lights dimming in time with the engine's pulse. Then came the feedback loops, where consoles began echoing commands no one entered. Navigation drones hovering over adjacent bays crashed into walls or spiraled into shutdowns. One drone scanned a reflective surface and vaporized itself, convinced it had seen a threat. Maintenance bots stopped responding. The crew blamed faulty relays. Cole kept working, occasionally scribbling strange diagrams into a grease-covered notepad. He wasn't just repairing. He was isolating. He was listening. The younger tech, the one with too many eyes and a silent way of watching, finally approached Cole after the third drone crash. "This thing you're working on," he said in halting Terran. "It's not just power core, is it?" Cole didn't look up. "No," he replied. "It's a containment system. Or it was." The kid blinked several of his eyes. "What's it containing?" Cole ran his fingers along the groove near the reintegration chamber and whispered, "Something designed to kill planets." The kid didn't ask more. That night, while the others were asleep or pretending to be, Cole stayed up again, alone with the engine. He pried deeper, found things that weren't meant to be inside a power unit: nerve channels, artificial muscle tissue, neural links fused to old circuit boards. This wasn't an engine. It was a skeleton. A host. A body for something that didn't need a pilot. Something that had once been alive, then killed, then somehow stored. The blade, it turned out, had been the plug in the dam. Pulling it hadn't triggered a system, it had released a memory. Cole began seeing things at the corners of his vision. A black shadow hovering above the engine 1 second, then gone the next. Whispers and static when he connected his scanner. The words repeated over and over: "Initiate, initiate, initiate." The Reaper protocol wasn't about building a weapon. It was about making sure it never woke up again. The next morning, another crew member went missing. This one had left a trail, a glove, partially melted, leading from the coolant line to the waste chute. Cole found it first, didn't say anything, just stuffed it into his bag and tightened the straps. When Vernak finally noticed the absence, he stomped over, demanding answers. Cole didn't respond. Vernak grabbed his shoulder, spun him around, and shoved him into the bench. "You think you're smarter than us? Just because you wear that ratty old Terran patch and stare at junk like it speaks to you?" Cole stood up slowly, his gaze cold. "It's not speaking. It's remembering." For a moment, no one moved. The lights above flickered, synchronized with the low growl of the engine again. Vernak snorted, muttered something about lunatics, and stormed off. But the younger tech stayed. He asked quietly, "What happens if it finishes remembering?" Cole didn't answer with words. He held up the datapad. On its cracked surface were 5 red lines, each representing a lock. 2 of them had gone dark overnight. 3 remained. When all 5 went dark, the Reaper would be fully awake. Cole knew what was coming. This wasn't just an engine ramping up. This was a protocol countdown. The locks weren't physical. They were memory constraints, fail-safes installed in the AI core to prevent it from reactivating its full consciousness. Pulling the blade had removed the kill switch. And now, each hour it spent powered, the system reassembled fragments of itself from the neural mesh embedded inside the metal. Cole had one option: reactivate the fail-safes manually, if they even still worked. But that meant navigating through a system built to kill intruders. He'd have to do it from inside. No firewalls. No suits. Just him, the blade, and whatever the Reaper remembered him as. That night, for the first time, he didn't work. He sat alone on a bench near the half-repaired engine, watching it glow. He pulled the blade out of the canvas bag and laid it across his lap. The metal sang softly, vibrating against his leg. It was ready. So was he. In the silence, he whispered, not to the engine, but to whatever part of it was listening. "You knew I'd come back, didn't you?" The engine hummed once in reply. The third lock went dark. The next day began with the sound of alarms. Not the shrill emergency kind meant to stir panic, but a low, constant, droning tone that echoed through Deck 9's massive steel rafters like the hum of something ancient shaking off rust. Cole opened his eyes where he had fallen asleep against a wall, the blade still across his knees. Lights flickered again, this time in rhythmic pulses, and when he stood, the floor beneath his boots felt warmer. The Reaper engine was heating up. Not overheating, just activating. Quietly. Confidently. Like a predator stretching before a hunt. He checked the datapad. Another lock had gone dark. Only 2 remained. He didn't need a guide to understand what that meant. It was waking up faster now. The system was rebuilding itself more efficiently with each pulse of memory that returned. By midday, the process would be complete. And Cole didn't know if the Reaper would recognize him as its former master, its killer, or just another target in a hangar full of organics to be erased. When he stepped into the main bay, the others were already gathered around. Something had happened. One of the ships docked near the far wall had been gutted in the night. Not vandalized, not stripped for parts, gutted. The hull had been melted in precise lines, down to the inner framework. It looked like someone had reached inside and pulled the ship apart from the inside out. The command systems had been burned clean, but not with fire. Something molecular. Something surgical. The senior techs argued over it, throwing blame, cursing, threatening to call in higher command. But none of them dared to approach the Reaper engine anymore. Even Vernak had stopped barking orders. He stood at a distance, watching Cole work like someone unsure whether to punch him or beg him for answers. The only one who still spoke to Cole was the young tech, who now followed him around quietly, asking questions in soft tones and jotting down notes with trembling hands. Cole had no answers for the questions that really mattered. Why here? Why now? Who sent the order? The encryption on the repair ticket had been older than most of the current fleet's protocol. Someone had gone digging in files that should have stayed buried and sent the Reaper's remains to a backwater dockyard staffed by amateurs and cowards, knowing full well it would activate eventually. But why assign Cole to it? That answer, he feared, lay inside the blade. He had hoped to never hold it again. But the Reaper's locks were tied to the blade's presence, its signal frequency, and its genetic memory. The last time he'd activated it, an entire squad had died. Not from enemies. From the Reaper itself. It hadn't known the difference. Or maybe it had, and simply hadn't cared. He began prepping the engine's core chamber for a manual override. It required wiring 6 junctions in a sequence designed to confuse any external AI watching. It was old war protocol. He still remembered the order: red, green, yellow, white, skip black, twist blue. Each twist of a wire was a countdown in itself. The system's internal defenses were meant to attack intruders on a neural level. If it detected a manual override without a command signature, it would pulse back with a spike strong enough to fry a brain in under 2 seconds. That was the gamble. The younger tech approached as Cole was halfway through the sequence, and asked what would happen if he failed. Cole didn't answer. He just said, "If the blade gets hot, run." That was the only warning he could give. By late afternoon, the 4th lock flickered and vanished from the datapad. Only one remained. The engine began projecting small pulses of electromagnetic waves, like sonar pings. Each one got stronger, louder, more defined. They weren't just random signals. They were search pulses, looking for something. Maybe a target. Maybe an order. Maybe a memory. That was when the hangar doors locked. Hard lockdown. Steel shutters slammed across every access tunnel. The overhead bay turned red with internal lighting. Everyone panicked. Shouts echoed as crew members banged on consoles, trying to override the lockout. Emergency panels refused clearance. Even the AI control tower went silent. They were sealed in. Cole looked at the engine and saw the center begin to split. It wasn't a malfunction. It was opening. Slowly. Like a flower unfolding. Something inside was rising, piece by piece, plated in armor and humming with 1,000 years of buried violence. Vernak finally snapped. He stormed toward Cole, grabbing his collar and slamming him into the nearest wall. He shouted accusations, spit flying, voice cracking with fear. "What did you bring here? What the hell did you wake up?" Cole didn't resist. He stared past Vernak to the engine and simply whispered, "I didn't wake it up." "You did. You pulled it out of sleep and poked it with jokes and orders and ignorance. You gave it time. All I did was remove the blade that was keeping it dreaming." Vernak raised his fist but never got to swing it. The power surged, and a discharge of white-blue lightning slammed through the hangar, throwing several crew members back. Cole barely kept his footing. The Reaper's outer shell peeled open completely now, revealing a humanoid core covered in synthetic muscle and laced with mechanical veins. Its head was smooth, faceless, but its chest glowed with a pulse in rhythm with the blade. Cole stepped forward, holding the blade loosely in his hand. The younger tech screamed for him to stop, but Cole didn't listen. The core was watching him. Not with eyes. With something deeper. A recognition of presence. A memory. Cole stepped within 10 feet of it and said softly, "Reaper unit, command override. Standby mode." No reaction. He tried again, louder. "Override command. Project Blackstar. Initiate standby mode." Nothing. Then he did what he had sworn he'd never do again. He stepped onto the engine's core plate, turned the blade around, and inserted it back into the housing slot. For a second, the hangar fell completely silent. No hum, no pulse, no breath. Then the system roared. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't an attack. It was relief. The energy dissipated. The armor retracted. The pulse slowed. Cole's voice, low and steady, said, "It remembers me. And this time, it doesn't want to kill." Behind him, the datapad showed the fifth lock still active, now glowing a deep green. The Reaper had stopped. But not because it was ordered. Because it chose to. Cole stepped down from the platform, his hand shaking. He looked at the others and said, "This isn't over. Something triggered this. Something higher up. And if they sent the Reaper to wake up here, then they're waking others." The war never ended. It just went quiet. And now it was breathing again. For the first time since the Reaper had begun waking, the engine bay was silent. No pulses. No flickering lights. No anomalies in the field diagnostics. The thing that had nearly torn itself free just hours earlier now sat dormant, folded back into a deceptively calm mechanical shell. But Cole knew better than to mistake stillness for safety. The blade remained embedded, glowing softly with the same rhythm as his own breath. It wasn't just a weapon or a kill switch. It was a bond. A key and a memory in one, forged in a war that most people in this galaxy preferred to pretend had never happened. Cole stood with his palms on the console, eyes shut, listening. Deep inside, the Reaper was still active, not aggressive but aware. It had recognized him. That should have been impossible. The rest of the crew remained quiet, some still in shock, others pretending to recalibrate tools just to have something to do. No one mocked him anymore. No one called him grease monkey or Terran fool. They had seen the thing rise. They had felt its heat. One of the older engineers still had a burn scar across his arm, even though he hadn't touched anything. The young tech who had been following Cole since the first malfunction sat nearby, tapping nervously at a handheld pad, but his eyes never left the core. Vernak hadn't spoken a word since being thrown halfway across the bay by that last surge. Now he stood leaning against a steel beam, watching Cole like a man trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want the answer to. Cole ran a diagnostics override through the console, watching as code strings scrolled faster than any of the others could read. He bypassed the public system entirely and went straight into the Reaper's core memory. It was like breaking into an old vault sealed with fire and blood. Inside, the logs were fractured but alive, storing voices, images, death counts, names of soldiers long forgotten. There were tags and mission protocols stamped with Terran military authority and blackout clearances from over 3 decades ago. The Reaper had not just been a weapon. It had been a witness to everything they had denied ever happening. Then Cole saw something that made his stomach twist. A recently added log. Time-stamped only 2 days before the engine had arrived at Deck 9. Not legacy data. New. Deliberate. And the tag wasn't Terran. It was Coalition authority. The same bureaucratic nightmare that now pretended to keep peace across the stars. They had reactivated the Reaper on purpose. Not to study it. To test it. And Cole had been the variable. They had placed him here, without warning, without command, without backup, to see what the Reaper would do when faced with its original handler. He slammed the console shut, drawing attention from the others. He took the datapad, accessed the security chem logs, and cross-referenced ship logs from 2 cycles ago. That's when he saw it. A Shadow-class freighter, barely visible on scans, had docked briefly before his arrival. It had no listed cargo. But the signature matched Black Ops operations from the war. Someone had brought the Reaper in under stealth, dumped it in the maintenance queue, and walked away. It was bait. Cole turned slowly toward the crew, eyes scanning their faces. He wasn't sure who to trust. One of them might have known. Might still be part of it. He didn't care anymore. He walked to the center of the bay and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. They sent this thing here to see if I'd stop it or fail. If it killed all of you, they'd mark it down as a risk evaluation. If I stopped it, they'd know it still works under Terran control. This wasn't a mistake. It was a simulation. No one moved. Not even Vernak had the nerve to challenge that. Cole continued. And now that they know it responds to me, they'll come to take it back. Or kill everyone who saw it. Either way, you're all witnesses now. Congratulations. The younger tech stepped forward and asked what they should do. Cole looked him in the eyes. Get off this rock. Before they lock this place down and burn it clean. The only thing keeping you alive right now is the fact that I haven't removed the blade again. But if they send in a kill team, that'll be the only leverage I've got. The console buzzed once. A proximity alert. Incoming vessels. 6 of them. No identification tags. No clearance requests. They were coming in fast and silent. Dropships, no doubt. He didn't even need to guess who sent them. Coalition Blackout Division. They always arrived just after the truth came out. He turned back to the Reaper. Its outer shell glowed faintly. The core was humming. It had sensed the incoming threat. And it was waiting for orders. Cole reached toward the blade, hesitated, then turned and grabbed the younger tech's wrist. He handed him the data pad. Take this. It has every log from the Reaper. Every war file they tried to delete. Get it to someone who can still talk to people with power. Someone not owned by the Coalition. The kid nodded, stunned but steady. Cole whispered the docking code for a hidden maintenance vessel tucked behind the fuel silos. Then he turned and walked back to the engine. He placed both hands on the frame. The Reaper's pulse synced with his heartbeat. It was ready. It didn't want to be chained again. But it didn't want to kill everything either. Not unless he told it to. That was the bond. Not control. Understanding. The drop ships landed with perfect silence. Magnetic locks hissed as they sealed against the deck. No hails. No demands. Just silent boots and approaching figures in faceless armor, weapons drawn and walking with purpose. Cole stepped forward, the blade in one hand, and said nothing. He didn't need to. Behind him, the engine stirred. Plates lifted. Energy built. A light beam traced his silhouette like a shadow being measured. The Reaper was awake. And it had made its choice. The armored troops moved fast, spreading out, trying to surround him. But before the circle closed, the lights above burst into blinding white, and the floor shook beneath their feet. The Reaper core surged with a pulse so loud it cracked the mainframe's shields. The soldiers staggered, screaming into dead calms. Cole stood firm, blade pulsing in his palm. He said only 2 words. Stand down. And the Reaper did not attack. It just rose behind him, massive, armored, humming with ancient memory and current fire, and stared down the invaders with a mechanical calm. The soldiers didn't fire. They froze. Because now they understood what the Coalition had built. And who it listened to. The soldiers didn't move. The Reaper didn't attack. The energy that filled the hangar was the kind that came before either peace or war, and no one could guess which side it would tip toward. Cole stood at the center of it all, his boots planted on scorched steel, the blade pulsing slowly in his grip, his eyes locked on the lead armored figure who had entered first. The figure didn't speak. Didn't raise a weapon. Just tilted his helmet slightly as if studying Cole through lenses the color of ice. Behind them, the others held position, fingers twitching near triggers, but none dared to fire. Even they weren't stupid enough to provoke something that could melt them down before their armor registered impact. Cole took one step forward. The Reaper's frame twitched behind him, like a shadow reacting to motion. It wasn't threatening. It was protective. For the first time since its activation, the Reaper wasn't seeing a target. It was seeing a reason. Cole had no intention of commanding it to destroy anyone. But he also wasn't going to let it be taken, dissected, or repurposed into a tool for people who buried the truth and built wars from shadows. He raised his voice and addressed the leader. You knew what this was. You knew where you were sending it. So who signed the order? Silence. Then the lead figure lifted a gloved hand and tapped a button on his neck piece. The voice that followed was flat, synthesized, too clean to belong to any organic throat. It said your presence here was unauthorized. The subject is reclaimed property under Article 17 of Coalition Recovery Protocol. Surrender it now and be debriefed. Your cooperation may be considered in sentencing. Cole smiled, not kindly. You people don't change. Still speaking like everything's already been decided. The blade in his hand pulsed brighter. The Reaper straightened, plates aligning along its back like a creature sharpening its spine. The soldiers flinched. He tilted his head. Let me guess. If I resist, you eliminate everyone here, claim it was a reactor malfunction, and tow the wreckage to some underground vault where the story ends with another classified file? The leader didn't answer. That was enough. Cole didn't wait for their permission. He turned to the Reaper and said, System override. Partial neurosync. Display last visual log. The core of the machine lit up, casting the entire bay in shifting images. Footage rolled across the curved walls, projected from the Reaper's memory. Images of cities burning, soldiers screaming, weapons melting midair, and then, most damning of all, human officers shaking hands with alien diplomats while turning their backs on the graves of their own troops. The betrayal. The secret treaties. The buried missions that led to entire crews being sacrificed. The Reaper had seen it all. And now everyone in the bay did too. The soldiers didn't speak. Even through their helmets, Cole could feel the shift. Some of them had never seen this side of the truth. They weren't all lifeless machines under orders. A few had enough humanity left in them to feel shame. Or fear. One of them lowered his weapon. Another took a step back. The leader barked an order, but only static came through his comm. The Reaper had overridden their signal grid. Cole stepped forward again. You want to know what the Reaper really is? It's not a weapon. It's a record. It remembers what you erased. It holds every face, every scream, every lie you paved over. You can destroy the shell, but the memory will scatter to every system it's touched. And I've already broadcast the encryption key. That was a bluff. He hadn't sent it. But he knew the Reaper could, if it chose to. The threat was enough. The soldiers hesitated. The leader raised a weapon, the barrel humming with charge. Cole didn't flinch. Behind him, the Reaper's body lowered into a coiled stance, ready to strike. Then, without warning, a loud crash echoed through the upper platform. A hangar bay door exploded inward as a small freighter burst through the emergency lockdown with its docking claws extended. It was the maintenance vessel. At the helm, the young tech Cole had entrusted with the data stood gripping the control yoke like his life depended on it. Which it did. Cole turned eyes wide. He hadn't expected the kid to come back. He had hoped he would escape, vanish into deep space, and live long enough to tell someone. Instead, the idiot had returned, risking everything to buy him a window. The ship hovered over the bay floor, loading ramp extended. The kid yelled through the external speaker, "Get on board. I'll hold it here." Cole didn't wait. He looked at the Reaper and said quietly, "It's your call. You stay, they destroy you. You come with me, we burn the truth into the stars." For a moment, the Reaper did nothing. Then its eyes flared, and it moved. Faster than any of the soldiers could react, it launched across the bay, grabbed Cole under one arm, and leapt onto the ramp. Gunfire erupted, too late. The freighter's rear thrusters ignited and the entire hangar shook as the vessel rocketed back into the tunnel it had carved open. Behind them, Deck 9 shrank into the distance. Below, alarms and containment walls failed to catch up. Inside the ship, Cole sat against a bulkhead, coughing from smoke and adrenaline, the blade still in his hand, the Reaper standing silent beside him. The young tech looked back, sweating, wide-eyed. Did we just start a war? Cole exhaled, closing his eyes. No. We just reopened one they never finished. They didn't speak for a long time after that. Outside, stars blurred past. Somewhere out there, eyes were watching. Files were already being deleted. Names scrubbed from history. But the Reaper remembered. And now, it wasn't sleeping anymore. Cole leaned his head back and whispered, "Guess we've got work again." The Reaper said nothing. But the hum in the engine room was steady now. Calm. For the first time, the blade in Cole's hand cooled. The war wasn't over. But this time, they weren't alone.